Hey, it's Caleb here. Thank you for joining me. For all those who have already, liked, shared, and commented previous videos, I certainly appreciate it. It's not lost. I mean, the time you spent with me. I just want to talk just a few minutes about a very delicate topic and subject, and that's trauma. Um, just to give you guys a little bit of a basic understanding of me and where I come from with this channel and some of my views and whatnot. Grew up in the 80s. I was born in the late 70s. Grew up in the 80s. Great time to be alive. And as a kid, it was a real small town, Greensboro, Florida, just outside Tallahassee. And, really life was, to use an old adage, it was pretty hunky-dory. But it wasn't everything that it could have been, that's for sure. The first real, trauma that I remember going through was whenever I was 10. And again, all these different things that I'll talk about, there's much bigger stories to them, but I'm just going to kind of condense it. My father worked for the railroad for, I don't remember if it was CSX yet, or if it was Seaboard Coastline. It might have been Seaboard Coastline still. But one of his jobs, it was a Saturday morning, one of his jobs was, as a rail foreman, was to do cleanup for people who got hit by trains. For whatever reason, I guess before cell phones, his guys that was on his crew, they were not answering the phone. I don't know why. And he ended up taking me instead of my brother Mark, who's a little bit older than I am. But for whatever reason, I went and he explained to me that, some guys got hit by a train. They were no longer alive. And in my little mind, it was like Bugs Bunny, hit the train, bounce off, and you just didn't get up. So we get there to the site where it happened, and he really took me for just an extra set of eyes, just in case, it was a bad part of the Tallahassee area, apparently, where we're going to. And so that was really the only reason why he took me, because he couldn't get a hold of his guys. And I remember seeing, body parts and whatnot, and it didn't impact me, it didn't bother me. And I okay, I already knew they were dead, but I'm seeing some things that a little 10-year-old mind can't process. And I do remember we were down there for about an hour, maybe hour and a half, something. When we were coming back, the sun was just starting to kind of really come up. He asked me several times on the way back, to the house, if I was okay. I remember saying I was fine. Didn't think about it. I wasn't stressed out about it. I was just wanting to go back to sleep. Got back to the house and went back to sleep. And that was it. It was never really talked about. It just wasn't. And life went on, and that was that. The next year, and again, there's way more to this, but the next year, my older brother, who was 10 years older than me, so I was 11. This was the summer of '88. It was after I turned 11, and so the latter part of the summer. And my older brother had gotten out of prison. He was in and out of jail and prison and stuff, basically his whole entire life, and for different odds and things and crimes. But anyway, so he was different this time. And again, this is the late 80s. There was definitely a social, I'm going to try to be PG, definitely a social stigma with a certain lifestyle. And he was different. He acted different. He talked different. I wasn't able to really put everything together exactly, but he had this friend who was in prison with him, and the friend would call, And for whatever reason, the friend would always want to talk to me. That was weird. Very weird. And I'm trying to be polite. I'm trying to be, nice and so on and so forth. But I finally told my mom, I was like, I don't want to talk to this guy. No more on the phone. I don't know him. I think he's a certain way. Of course, I'm thinking my brother's a certain way now because just the correlation. And of course, that ended up to be the case. They were incarcerated. And so he also had these little funny videos that ended up being snuff films, and I watched a couple of those, and that was just like, my little brain cannot conceptualize what I'm seeing. And so that was traumatic. And then he was there at the house for about 2 months, and he ran off. But the reason why he ran off was he did a very horrible thing to me. That starts with the letter R. Again, trying to be PC with it. And he manipulated me in not telling my mom or my dad. My dad had a very, very, very violent temper. And to the point where now, this brother is not my mom's child. He was from my dad's first marriage. And my other brother is from my dad and my mom. And so anyhow, he manipulated me not to tell because, Dad would be extremely angry, and I did not want to make him angry. And then I couldn't tell Mom because I would disappoint Mom. And of course, a couple hours later, after he ran off, my dad goes to work. He's no more the wiser. My mom gets up, notices that he's run off, and then all the attention is what happened to him. So anyhow, through a process of like 3 hours, I convinced myself that it didn't happen. And after that 3-hour period, I remember rocking back and forth, just telling myself it didn't happen. For like 3 hours, that was that. I mentally put it in a place in my brain where, it didn't happen. But I do remember, looking back, I do remember I went from this, really, sweet kid, always willing to, be helpful and all this kind of stuff, to just, and I still was, in a lot of ways, that same kid, but I was now angry, just an extremely, had like anger, just these bouts of real anger. For several years, and I couldn't figure it out. By the time I was 17, I was always in fights. Always. The last big fight I was ever in, I was 16. But just bitterly angry, from the time I was 11 to even after that. Of course, I was 8, and I turned 18. I contemplated, and again, there's a much bigger story to it, but I contemplated taking somebody's life, and I remembered when that took place, I was okay with it. It didn't bother me that I had gotten mentally and emotionally to that point where I would do that. And years later, I've come to find out that I have I guess it's a dissociative personality, I guess it is, and I can compartmentalize things and feel or not feel. And like when my father died when I was 24, I didn't feel a thing. Nothing. Didn't bother me at all. And of course, there's a lot to that, but anyway, so I was 18. Thankfully, nothing happened. Again, there's a much bigger story to it. And then shoulder injury, that was trauma. I ended my baseball career right before I was going to sign a professional contract to play independent ball. It wasn't, associated with an actual major league team, but still professional baseball. So that was traumatic, because I'd worked years and years and years to make it to professional ball, and I'm trying to figure out, why is this happening? And then a couple years later, my dad dies, and then literally 3 weeks later, 9/11 happens, 2001. So within the first 24 years of my life, I had a lot of significant traumatic issues. And then, of course, through military service, I went to Iraq. And even though I was never in hand-to-hand combat in Iraq, there were, a plethora of times, numerous times, where, indirect fire was pretty close several times. And that was one thing. The fear of IEDs while we're on convoys, and, you're stressed out. You're trying to, do a good soldier's job and pay attention. And, you're just in this pressure cooker, and those of you who have frontline experience, you know it way more than I do, for sure. And we were rear echelon that, because of our job, we got to go out and experience, and I'm grateful for that experience. Because it helps me understand and empathize with, the infantry soldier and the Cav Scout and the like. With what, if you're watching this and you had that MOS of what you guys went through. And I'll never try to, steal you guys' thunder at all. Because I didn't do what y'all did. And the level of trauma you guys, have had to, endure is supersedes anything that I've ever had to go through. But war still impacts you. It doesn't matter, what your job was and the total scope of what happened. And again, I can talk individual stories on this channel about different things that'll bring more to light. But you're always going to be forever changed. And of course, I didn't really completely appreciate that and understand that whenever I came back. But within the first 6 months, within that first 6 months, I thought I was, pretty squared away. And then it just slowly, just completely unraveled. And just the stress and trying to put everything in its proper place. And I couldn't. I couldn't do it. And I used to have one of the things that used to drive me crazy was I was very detail oriented with I had a huge, I love to read, and I had this huge big old collection of books in my barracks room, and they were all tapered off just right, and hardback to paperback and whatnot, and to the thickness of the books. And I remember talking to this one therapist, and he was like, you gotta embrace a little bit of clutter. You can't just keep everything. Life is not that way, especially my life right now at that particular point in time. And I've done a lot of, group therapy, individual therapy, and so on and so forth. But it really kind of helped to really break things up, to allow some clutter. And I remember how uncomfortable that was, allowing a little bit of clutter, and you're wanting to change it, but you had to let this process play out. And another thing that he was really good at, this particular therapist, I had some really, really good ones, and I had some that wasn't so good at all. And of course, if you've gone through this process within the military, you know what I'm talking about. But I always had these really horrific nightmares about getting killed. And I remember my throat was always the big vulnerable part. I get shot in the throat, stabbed in the throat, broken neck, whatever the case might be. And it was just like I would just wake up and just be drenched. And the therapist was like, well, it's just a dream. He's like, you can change the outcome of the dream. And I was like, well, how do you change the outcome of the dream? It's settled. I woke up. And he says, well, write it down, but give it an alternate ending. And that was a complete foreign concept to me. But I started to do that, and it worked. It really, really, really worked. Now, fast forward, almost 20 years later, I still have bad dreams, and I probably have 3 of them awake. And in those dreams, pretty much all of them I get killed. They don't bother me now, because I'm not saying I've 100% passed it, but I don't get weirded out about it. Unless it's something that I'd never went through before, like it was a brand new kind of way to die. But it's not something I do still struggle with. I don't sleep very well. I'm sure if you're watching this and you're a veteran, you might be in the same situation. Anyway, I tell you guys that for a couple of different reasons. One, just so you know a little bit more about me, my story, and kind of what this channel is more about. And even the thought process of trying to get back in, where I would be subjecting myself back to a certain level of trauma because of a desire to serve. It's part and parcel of that kind of way of life. Sadly, it is. But anyway, also just to say to you that if you're going through something, and I need to, still reach out to a professional. I've gone through, therapy, and it was through therapy that I was able to put everything together with what happened to me whenever I was 11, and other things. My relationship with my father. Therapy is good, and I don't know anything about therapy other than what I've learned through going through it. But just the process of talking about, whatever it is, it does help. And sadly, we lose more people to self-inflicted harm who served than those who were taken from us on the battlefield. And a lot of us feel completely alone. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I haven't felt that way throughout my journey since I came back in 2009, because I have. I contemplated, even while I was in the Army, after returning, of doing the same thing. I just didn't have the proper means to do it, and every scenario that I kind of played out and how to do it, I didn't like, because it didn't make sense to me to do it that way, or whatever reason. But we do all struggle. There's no doubt about that. I know a lot. I can't put my place into the same shoes as someone who did way more than me in a theater of war. So I'm not going to sit here and try to 100% tell a combat soldier who did the worst of the worst and experienced the worst of the worst, oh, I know exactly how you think and feel, because I don't. And but I will say this, that we're never going to be fully whole, ever, no matter what our job was, what we experienced. That's just a reality and everything. But it has helped shape us into um, a very usable sword, if you will. We have value. Even through our trauma, we have value. And that's one thing you have to kind of understand and appreciate. As much as you can, you still have value. You are still of use, um, maybe in a different way, but you're still of use. You're still of value, no matter what you had to go through, what you did, what happened to you. You're don't don't throw yourself away. Um, you're you're valuable. You know. I've had to learn that with myself. I've had to learn to be very patient with myself. I'm not a very patient person. I'm just not. Never have been. I don't know why, things happen. Traumatic things happen to people. They do for whatever reason. And, you know, we have to make, no matter what happens in our life, we have to make the best of whatever it is. And I know that's kind of a cliche thing to say, but it's true. It doesn't change the fact that it happened, whatever it is, and we're changed by it, but it doesn't have to define us and who we are in a negative sense. But if you're watching this still with me, I certainly appreciate it. Tell me in the comments your story. And if you're thinking about self-harm or harming somebody else, whatever, please reach out to somebody who can really help. Doesn't have to be a professional. It could just be somebody to talk to, and talk to me through the comments. If you want to, that's fine. I'll read it. And but yeah, don't ever give up, no matter what it is, how dark it might seem. That, again, it might sound kind of cliche-ish and whatnot, and I get that, but the light will always overcome the dark. It will, unless we allow the darkness to overcome us, and that's a place that none of us ever want to go to. And we supported each other, in uniform, and for the vast majority, 90, upwards, almost to 100%, we still support each other now. And so always reach out to your brothers and sisters in arms, and just keep going. Tell somebody your story. Take ownership of it. Don't let it. That's one of the things I've had to learn with myself is to be open, be vulnerable with it. And again, I can cover way more of these different issues in separate videos for sure. This is just kind of a, shotgun blast of, if you will. But anyway, I'm going to go, and I'm going to go clear my mind and probably watch a video of people cutting grass or something. But hope everyone's doing well. Again, tell me your story in the comments. Please like and subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.